And welcome into Dental Profits Live. I am so excited to have you with us today. The greatest interview of all time is about to happen in just a second. My friend Reese Harper, we're going to be talking about why you as a dentist are not where you need to be financially. This is going to be good. Stay with us. Hi, folks. I'm Sean Crabtree.
And I'm Cameron Bailey.
We don't want to change the way you do business.
We want to change the way you're thinking about your business.
We want you to have better results, happier clients, and make more money.
Let's get it started.
And welcome back. I'm so excited to have with us Mr. Reese Harper, CFP, that's Certified Financial Planner, who works specifically with dentists and dental specialists. And I truly cannot wait to dive into this conversation. You know, this show comes to you each week, and it's all about you having happier clients, better results, making more money, but it's also about enjoying the ride. And I can't wait to dive into this conversation. I think as Reese and I were just talking a moment ago, you know, there are people out there who might think that a conversation about financial planning could be a little bit boring. I can promise you this. This is going to be nothing at all boring about this conversation. Reese, welcome aboard. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate it, man. Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics. It's either money. Money is one of those topics that people don't like to talk about at cocktail parties, you know, but it's my favorite one. So I try to make it interesting.
Well, listen, it is absolutely one of my favorite topics. And I think, you know, you've been doing this for almost a decade, right? Specifically with dentists and dental specialists.
Yeah, but it's almost 15 years now.
Oh, almost 15. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and dentists, specifically with dentists though, for about 11 now. Yeah,
awesome.
When I started, I was just working with general business owners. I had general contractors, accountants, some attorneys, some consultants, and a few dentists. And eventually I just kind of saw how dentists struggled in a unique way. And it was just really fulfilling to kind of work with the people who I felt like had the greatest need for financial planning in a real comprehensive way. And so I just rebranded my company to dentistadvisors.com and plugged ahead.
And by the way, we have you on a split screen, Reese. And so Reese's contact information is right there below, dentistadvisors.com/group. There's a closed group that Reese has there that if you want to jump into, I would advise you to do that. Now, listen, I am really excited about diving into this conversation. As you know, Reese, I've been working with dentists and dental teams from Vancouver to Barbados for well over 20 years. It has always shocked me. I've always said that when you compare dentists to the rest of America, if you look at some of the financial holes that are out there, dentists have a bigger shovel than most in terms of being able to dig out of that hole. And so it shocks me when I see an ADA stat that says that on the average, dentists retire later, 6 years later, than the average American. I mean, that blows me away. Why is that? Why is that, Reese?
Yeah, man, we're still doing a lot of research on this. I don't know that I have the exact answer, but I have a lot of good hypotheses on this. And I think the thing you pointed out is they do have the biggest shovel. I think it's important to acknowledge that because that's what makes the statistics so interesting, right? I mean, if you take all incomes of all occupations in the entire country and you say, who has the highest income? Dentists will usually get ranked like in the top 2 or 3 or 4 sometimes, but they're actually, in my experience, they're by far at the number 1 position. Even though they get ranked slightly lower, the reason they get ranked lower is because the national surveys on income, they're only getting W-2 payroll data to show what dentists are making. So guys pay themselves a salary that's usually lower than they want to keep their taxes down, so they pay themselves a low salary. But their incomes through profits, through net income, make their total income be much higher. I mean, we just did an average income calculation yesterday across our clientele. Now, granted, we probably work with we probably have slightly more successful dentists on average because once you work with a financial planner for a while, your income tends to go up and you tend to be a little more capable. But the average income was like 422 or 423 across hundreds of samples. And what I was looking at was, the average data, like nationally, that the ADA will disclose, it's going to be like in the high twos to mid twos.
Right.
Even
Right.
at that level, like we're still by far the highest earning occupation, but we really are retiring 6 to 7 years later than the average American that's retiring at 62, 63, and dentists are anywhere from 69 to 70, depending on the survey.
Again, that just blows me away because I was talking with my producer earlier about this, and I mean, our experience is absolutely the opposite. I mean, the guys that we work with, they're retiring at 50. They're retiring at 49. It blows me away that nationwide that is an actual stat. I gotta tell you, I mean, I'm amazed by that. I'm not questioning the stat. I'm amazed.
I was
by that.
too, man. And I think if you go to the ADA's website, you can kind of read their retirement income survey and kind of look at the statistics, look at the questions they asked. There probably is some room in there there's some dentists they're choosing to retire late.
Right.
Some are choosing to. They like what they do so much that they're sticking around. But the reason I did a poll last week though, because I'm like, I want to believe that dentists have the option to retire at 50 or 51, and they're just choosing to retire at 70. Right? I want to believe that. But when I posted a question last week that said, if you could stop working at 55 and retire as early as possible, or work till 65 or 67, right, and spend 100 grand more a year every year. Like, you could spend more and work later, or you could retire earlier and just wrap it up.
Which would you do?
80% of the people were like 55 and done.
Right.
Like no one was like, yeah, I just want to like increase my lifestyle and extend the career. So I'm like,
it's interesting.
This statistic, like the people you work with, the people I work with, they kind of self-select into a category of dentists that are choosing to get help and are real.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
But the majority of people, like they're just locking out all outside influence. They're coming in, they're just doing what they can, and they're not really problem solving to improve their practice or personal finances. They're just, I mean, a third of, I just read, this week I had a meeting with a dude from Toronto, a guy from Germany, and one from New York that's part of this company called Simon Kucher. And it's a big national pricing, like, consulting company. Because I was trying to figure out, like, how much can I lower my prices to grow faster? Or do I have to keep my prices where they're at, or increase my price? And so we did a big old survey, and what they found actually was, they showed me a research project they did last year that helped me kind of make some decisions. And the research project said about 40% of all customers in the United States, when it comes to financial planning, will choose not to hire someone. Like, just they're diametrically like opposed to hiring anyone for help. And I think that their hypothesis was that people are scared. Maybe they don't trust financial people, which I can totally understand that. There's a lot of bad players in the market.
Just like there are a lot of bad dentists. Just like there are a lot of bad judges and attorneys and everything else, right?
Yeah. I think people are hyper private about their money. And I think sometimes they feel so embarrassed to like let someone in. I mean, almost every time, Sean, like 9 times out of 10, we hire someone. As soon as we get into the personal financial statement and disclosing like all of the information, 9 times out of 10, I hear someone say, I just kind of feel bad. I haven't really talked to somebody about this for, I really needed to do it, but you can tell it's kind of a vulnerable thing.
Sure.
You're naked for the first time.
No, absolutely.
And so I think most people just don't want to go through that pain of solving the problem. I think that's the majority of people.
So let me ask you this, Reese. What brought you to dentists? Why dentists? Why dentists and dental specialists? Why is that your mainstay?
Yeah, I think the short answer is just I think they needed more help than other business owners I was working with. They needed more help. And I liked that. I liked that they were like really, they were openly honest about not knowing what was going on with financial stuff. And that's not the whole dental population. I mean, 20 or 30% of dentists are really financially savvy and they'll DIY everything. But I was working with different business owners in all different segments, and the dentists had the most they had the most financial pain. And what I mean by that is their financial picture, even though they had a big shovel, like you said, they have a high income, they have a much more complex personal financial statement.
Right.
And a
Yeah,
much
I found
more
that too.
complex picture. I mean, they've got business debts, equipment debts, they've got real estate holdings, they've got multiple entities, they have a lot of staffing, they have a really high ratio of like complexity to income. So for as small as the dental business is, you know, a million to 5 million in sales, it's a super complex business to run. I mean, it's a service, and the dentist is the deliverer of that service. So he's the technician. He's not able to work on the practice and do the dentistry as
Right.
easily.
Unless they're working with somebody like us, they don't have those systems in place to be able to maximize the opportunities. That's a really good point. Let me ask you a question. You guys do investments and you do financial planning, so you do both, and you do either or and both for a lot of clientele. There was I had a really close relationship with a company that did the same thing years ago. And before I tell you about that situation and why I don't use them anymore, I'm curious. Tell us just a foundation, just a philosophical sort of a thing. When it comes to the planning aspect, okay? What is the philosophical approach that you guys take when it comes to that?
A philosophical approach to financial planning for me that's just a bedrock of what we do is that financial planning should be more like a dentist's comprehensive exam, x-rays, and treatment planning. Like it should be more like that, where your financial advisor should have a concrete set of x-rays that he is using to measure you, and he should rely on those for objectivity, not having like a subjective just kind of advice that he throws around. But most financial planners don't have a set of x-rays. They don't have a concrete set.
And I think that's what's important for you on the investment side too, because you guys are fee only, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're not, in other words, and for those that don't understand what that means, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you're fee only, so you're working for the client versus being paid on commission by the investment brokers.
Yeah, it'd be like if Henry Schein paid dentists different amounts of money based on what filling in composite they placed.
Right.
Right? Like that's the bad model, right? And you don't want, that'd be like the worst DSO in the world. Patient doesn't know what the fees are. Dentist gets paid by product vendors and he puts whatever he wants into their mouth. Different crowns pay different amounts of money, different implants pay different amounts of money. That would be a really bad model. That would be crazy. But that's how financial planning is. It's like 90% of the industry. In my model, it's just a really simple fee structure. You pay a monthly fee, and that monthly fee gives you access to certain services and a certain level of depth. And so you asked the question, like, what is financial planning? To me, we have a dashboard that like connects to people's practice loans, their practice valuation. We appraise like a lot of their real estate, all this different stuff. We think that financial planning should be a monthly, instead of having a big plan, we think it's a small like monthly checklist of items. So in January, we work on personal spending. In February, we work on insurance. In March, we're looking at taxes. In April, we're looking at real estate. In May, we're looking at...
That's good. And all of those things absolutely have to come together.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, and I want to talk to you about some of those, because I've experienced some very interesting behaviors that I've learned that not only play into the lack of success with the business, they also carry over into the lack of success when it comes to the dollars and the management of those dollars across all of those areas that you're talking about. So let me just throw this out. So you guys do both. I had a client years ago, very good client of mine. The short version of the story is he and I had been together for many years. We doubled and then tripled his practice. Worked him through. We hired an associate. We transitioned the practice over another couple of years to the associate. The associate fully bought out that practice. And then the original doctor and I went together, and he bought his second practice and started, fresh again and so forth. And along the way, there were lots of things that were happening financially for him. There's, of course, a huge influx from the sale of the practice. There were some other things that he had going on. And so, long story short, there was a group that I'm not going to say on this video, but these guys, I had a relationship with these guys. They tried to convince this doctor to go borrow $500,000 to invest in a particular system that they had on the investment side of their business. What do you think about that?
So they convinced him to borrow money to invest.
They tried to convince him to go borrow $500,000 and take that borrowed money and invest it into a particular investment. What are your thoughts?
Okay. Not in their practice, in their company, but in an investment they were recommending, right?
Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So your question has more to do with borrowing to invest, like if that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think for me personally, that's a really, really sophisticated recommendation. Like that's a really over the top. Like you have to be very cautious before borrowing money to invest money. I mean, you're doing that when you buy a dental practice, but you at least have an asset there that's like backing up the debt. And so for me, like I don't like to borrow money to make investments that aren't an asset backed investment. Like I don't mind borrowing to buy real estate. I don't mind borrowing to buy a business or borrowing to buy a practice. You can do that in, like our clients, we have a pretty sophisticated investment platform. So if you have $1 million invested, I don't mind seeing people borrow against their investment account to pay off high interest rate debt. So a lot of times we'll borrow against their investment account at 2 or 3%, and they'll pay off a student loan. They'll pay off a practice loan. They'll pay off a very expensive.
So you're borrowing at a lower rate to pay off a higher rate.
Right. Yeah. And I don't mind that. And then you just start saving money against your account again and pay off the debt.
Right.
That's called margin lending. I don't have a problem with that, but I don't like borrowing to invest money in anything that's not asset backed. I don't even borrow money to buy stocks. I think it's too speculative and it's really risky.
Well, I agree with that, and of course I'm just asking you off the cuff, and I didn't give you any of the particulars of the scenario, but in its simplest form, I mean,
to me it smells like they were selling something. I mean, to me it smells like selling.
At the end of the day, it certainly smells like that, and from a simplistic standpoint, you're talking about borrowing dollars that have a fixed payback rate, investing them in something that has a risky return. I don't.
What I'd say is your financial advisor, like in our case, we get paid the same amount of money whether he has that $500,000 sitting in municipal bonds, stocks, or this other investment, a private placement, a small.
I do like that. Yeah.
We get paid the same, and so that allows us to say, what's the best investment for this person's personality and
it's a transparent strategy based on where that person wants to go rather than
and I think it's really, really important to have that kind of fee structure. And most financial planners get paid some kind of a commission, some kind of a lump sum, some kind of upfront big chunk when they put your money places. And I'm just saying objectively, that's like 90+% of the industry is doing it that way. A fee-only fiduciary,
which is what you are,
what I am, cannot do that. But there are a lot of people that are what are called duly registered, or they'll say I'm fee-based. Fee-based and fee-only are not the same. Fee-based is I could sell you something for a commission over here, and I'll charge you a fee over here. It just depends on what I decide to sell you. And then there's commission-only, which
I did not know that.
Paid commissions. So you don't. The bulk of the industry is in the middle. They're in this fee-based world, and they don't want to give up the commissions because they make too much money off selling stuff, so they won't go fee-only. So there's a big debate that goes on in the industry. Fee-only people like me are like, you guys got to get off of your high horse, and you've got you've got to start going to what's best for the public. Go to fee only, drop your commission-based licenses, drop your sales, like get out of that business because it's not good for people.
I love
But,
that, man. I love that.
Anyway.
One of the things that you talk about quite a bit is something that I want to get into here for a minute. As you know, I've been doing this for a lot of years, and I found myself spending the last 20 years trying to have the people that I work with, or whether that's on social media or whatever, trying to have them understand that the things that are going through their mind, the mindsets and so forth, are really what dictate the behaviors that either are pushing you toward or away from success. And I think I've learned in dentistry that not just with dentists, but across the board, and everybody on the team, I mean, what they think is possible, what they think they're capable of, what they think their patients will or won't do, what they think the area, the demographics will handle, all of these things play into the behavior that they will or won't implement that's driving them to success. And so that's one of the things that you talk about quite a bit. I'd love to know, what are the top 3 behaviors that you see? And I'm going to ask you what the cause of that is, do you think? What's the underlying thought process? What are the top 3 behaviors that you see that are really getting in the way of dentists making great financial decisions?
I did a podcast yesterday that this question kind of hits on, and the concept in the podcast was, we talked about sharks and how it's just Shark Week just happened, and there's so many people like obsessed with sharks in the United States, right?
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Sharks are like, I think they're responsible for, can't remember the exact number, but it was like very low double-digit deaths, like in 2018 or 17. It was like 10 or 12 or something.
Yeah, it's just really ridiculous. Right. It's minuscule.
Yeah, but I mean, wolves were like 1,200. Like hippopotamuses had more deaths than sharks, and elephants killed more people than sharks. The highest killer animal in the whole world was a mosquito.
All right? No kidding. You heard it here, folks.
Yeah.
The highest killer.
It's a killer.
Mosquitoes kill more people than any other animal. That's interesting.
It's like 500,000 people were killed by mosquitoes. All right. And but people are more worried about sharks than they are anything else. I mean, it's one of the highest fears in the animal kingdom, right? So my point is, like, in many cases, dentists worry about these things, these sharks. They worry about some things that they feel like are sharks, but they're not really focusing on the mosquitoes. They're not really looking at the more likely killers. So in my experience, I'd have to kind of rank it maybe top 3. It's really hard. Like, we had like 10, but my top 3 would be people think about the rate of return on their investments. They obsess over it. Like, the rate of return on your investment, they focus on it like it's the most important thing, when in reality, it needs to be the risk that the thing to really worry about is the risk you take with the investment. Like, you can make a 14% rate of return, but it might be a very wild ride to get there. Or someone might promise you a 9% rate of return, but they have to deliver on that through a really unlikely set of scenarios. But you might be able to get a 6% rate of return with a high amount of predictability. And for your own situation, a lot of people will chase returns at the expense of thinking about risk, and they end up losing money. I mean, here's the truth, Sean. Like, take the average dentist, say he makes $250,000 a year. At best, the highest savers are going to be able to save 30% of that income. So they'll be able to save somewhere around $6 or $7 grand a month, all right, on 250. That'd be a really good saver. Most people, our average client's only going to be like $4 grand a month or $5 grand a month, which is 25% of their income. So average savers, 25% of income, high savers, 30, 35% of your income. Okay. Now, most people they'll struggle to get up to that 20, 25%, but that's our average client. That's where you should be. And if you take 20 years of your life, right? You take 20 years of your life and you save 20% of your income, and that's, $70,000 a year. I mean, that's only a few $1,000,000, right? If you speculate on, once you start to get a little money piled up out of your possible 2 million that you might be able to save for the average person, people listening to this are like making a lot more than that potentially, because maybe there's a specialist or two or a guy with multiple locations. I'm talking about the average GP. Okay. If you lose 250 or 300 or 400 on one deal, that sets you back like 7 years, man. It's 7 years it's setting you back. It's not just like a little bit of a setback. So I think that
chasing returns versus paying attention to risk is one of the big issues that you see. Yeah.
Second thing is they don't outsource enough. So they don't hire a consultant. They don't hire a coach. They don't hire a financial planner. They don't hire a good bookkeeper. They don't hire a good CPA. They don't hire a good attorney. They don't hire a good marketing agency. They don't hire a good consultant. It's like they look at any amount of expense as something that is going to just eat into their income. And I think that ultimately,
I think that's huge, man.
You gotta look at, like, I don't do that. Like, I did a podcast yesterday to a group of financial planners because my business is kind of a very niche market, and I was labeled as the godfather of niche markets in this podcast. Okay. And this group of financial planners are all trying to figure out, like, how do I get out of this generic business model I'm in and get into a niche?
A niche, right?
And the interesting thing about it was that most of these people that were tuning in, they were really struggling with this idea that I was cutting my personal income to invest in people in my practice. They're like, everyone's focused on profitability, like profitability. How high can I get my profitability, right? Which is good. Dental profits are amazing. But to get high profitability, you have to back off that profitability for a little while.
Listen, I would go a step further, buddy, because I've run it. I just did a podcast on this not long ago. Okay. I mean, what you're really talking about is you're talking about being focused on expenses rather than opportunity. Really, that's what you're talking about, and I call it the bean counter mentality. And if you look back historically at businesses or just individuals who are trying to run their lives or their businesses based on counting the beans, it doesn't work. It does not work. That is not the way you become successful. And we hear it formalized in the questions. We hear it structured in the questions. I mean, you mentioned, that people want to increase their profitability, but that's not the questions that they ask. People come to us and they don't ask us, how do I increase my profitability? You know what they ask? How do I cut my expenses?
Yeah,
that's what they ask. And so inevitably what they do is, when it comes to management of their business, they're looking at, oh my gosh, they're agonizing over a 3% line item in their overhead. And I'm going, dude, you cut that 3% line item by a whopping 75%. You have not touched your opportunity. Instead of worrying about a 3% line item, go grow your practice $150,000 a month. Now you're working on your profitability, right? Yeah. And that's really what you're talking about here, is the bean counter versus and they're looking at the expenses rather than maximizing the profitability.
Yeah, and I think I really appreciate that, Sean. I think that's great advice, man. And I want to clarify the exact thing I'm talking about here is I'm very frugal. Like, I'm super frugal. Like, I don't have the most expensive office. But I have a nice office, right? I don't have a crappy office. Like, there's a difference. Like, right? Like, there's a difference.
So, there's definitely a difference in nice and crappy, man. I think.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, there's nice, there's good, better, best. And what I find is, like, most people aren't filling everything with a better category. They're doing, it's like bad, good, better, or, they're not in the middle range of, they're either not even investing in that category at all, or they're in the bottom end of the category, or they're in the top end of the category. And really what you want to try to do is find the right expense, but fill every category of expense that needs to be filled. For example, like, you don't neglect social media completely. You don't do that. If you're doing that, then you haven't even filled it with a good, better, best option. right?
And if you justify that based on a cost saving, then the
Yes.
opportunity that is lost is tremendous.
Yeah.
Right?
The same thing with like financial. I feel that way with financial planning, about consulting and coaching. Like I have a coach, I've got a consultant, I have multiple consultants. I have a pricing consultant. I have an operations consultant. I have a trading consultant around our investment ops. But all of these consultants combined, and I have a personal coach. It's like a shrink, right? So I've got all of these, and I need it, like Sean, like I need it bad. It's a daily call. It's a 2-hour daily call. And so what I'm saying though is like, I'm not blowing my bank on this stuff. I've negotiated the right amount of fees for each of these consultants, and I'm not paying an arm and a leg for each one, but I'm not like,
but you're not scrimping either or eliminating it, right?
Yeah, they're there. Right. They're part of my business. And without them, I wouldn't be growing at, 40 to 50% a year. I'm growing.
I think to me the bottom line of this, and again, this is close to my heart, obviously, and I want to go to the next question, but this one is a big one. I think the real trick is focus not on the cost.
Yeah.
Focus on the opportunity, and that will allow you to get in a situation where you're not all or nothing, right?
Yeah.
But you got to be focused on, if you're trying to DIY everything, then you're looking at the cost and the expense versus the opportunity that you're losing out on. So chasing returns rather than also putting a lot of focus on risk, and then putting a focus on expenses versus opportunity. What's the third one?
Third item I would say is dentists are focused on debt reduction at the expense of everything else. So dentists focus on, like, when you go get a loan for debt, dentists are focused on debt reduction, and they're really obsessed over interest rates. And those things that's the shark, right? Dentists don't default on debt. Like, there isn't a default. Like, most dentists will.
It's less than 1%, actually.
It's that's like a shark, right? Yeah, it's 0.02 or whatever. There's there's very low default.
It's non-existent, right?
And so, but there is a fear sometimes of like that's holding them back, or that might happen. They don't want to like have debt. And the challenge with this is DSOs, like large DSOs, are very, very, very comfortable with that. And so if you want to compete today and build a practice that's competitive, you're going to need your cash. You're going to need your liquidity. You're going to need to have your capital. And the only way to have your capital is by using debt in a way that's wise. Meaning, like, if someone will give you a 15-year loan as opposed to a 10-year loan, and you can get 15-year financing at 6.5, but you could get 10-year financing at 5.75, take the 15-year financing. Take the 17-year financing. Take the 12-year financing. Because what we're saying is it's not like we're not going to pay that off early. We might pay that off in 7 years, but we need
not locked in
to accomplish the things that you and I were talking about in the prior conversation. Now, not all of these things aren't my areas. Like 2 out of these 3 things don't even they affect me and my clients, but I don't make money doing those 2 things for a living. There's a lot of other areas we could go into today, but I'm focused. Financial planning should support the practice. Financial planning should support your income and your growth. And if your financial advisor doesn't have these kinds of thoughts ever, I promise you're going to have a horrible financial planning experience. Because all they're going to do is say, how much money do you have every month, Dr. Jones?
Exactly.
$5,000. Right. What can you put away? Well, that shouldn't even be the question. We shouldn't be taking $5,000 a month out of this practice if we don't even have basic profitability growth. If we don't have like basic hygiene department, self-sufficiency. If we don't have if we're not at a reasonable level of collections for the overhead that we have, we shouldn't be saving money yet for retirement. We have to get to a point to where the practice is healthy enough, and then we can measure how much we should start peeling away.
And that's the way we look at it. I mean, we look at the practice as a vehicle simply to get you what it is that you want. I'm curious, just real quick, off the top of your head, without a bunch of thinking.
Yep.
What is the typical profit rate that you see in a dental practice?
before they have help, and on average, I would say that dentists are probably running a 10% margin, 10 to 11 at best, and that's after they pay themselves, hopefully 25.
Oh, after they pay themselves. Okay.
Hopefully 25 to 30% of your own production, you're at least keeping that, right? But beyond that, I on average, we're probably at 10 to 11, and we should be closer to 20 to 23, 20 to 25 at most. But I mean, I would be happy 17 to 20 if I saw that consistently. I mean, we measure these off tax returns, and we're very particular about what we see on benchmarking stats. I just find that there are a lot of dentists. I would say a third of the dental population is actually running the practice for free. They're getting paid.
Yeah, no, I see that all the time. And our guys shoot for 59%.
So that would be
59% overhead before the doctor gets paid. Okay, so we're shooting for a 41% profitability basically before the doctor gets paid. Many of our clients are, at a 49 or a 50% profitability. But you have to have the systems in place to be able to get to that stage. And then when you do, now you're at choice when it comes to the things that you're talking about.
Yeah, what do you typically pay? What do doctors typically take of their own production? 25 or 30? Is that kind of typically what you see of their own take on their own production?
We don't even count it on production. We count it on collection. Okay. And so, in other words, their net income, we're looking at a 59% overhead with a 41% profitability, but that's before the doctor gets paid. So if they have associates or whatever, that's included in the overhead.
Yeah. Okay.
And then of course we've got, all the line items broken down, supplies, lab, and all of that. All of that added up should be 59% with a 41% profitability going to the doctor. And that's where the investments, that's where the doctors pay. That's where, equipment purchases or whatever, goes for from there. Let me ask you this. I want to switch gears on you. And I was really just looking for a number. I was curious. Give us three things, or I don't care, just one big thing, okay, that you see is most often the things that you're recommending that doctors need to do. And I don't care if you're talking about on the investment side or on the planning side. I want my listeners and my viewers to come away with at least one, if not more, big thing that you recommend because you see it all the time and it's like the most important.
Okay, I'll try to do this. I'm gonna do this in 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes. I'm gonna give you a good list. The first one is cash drag, meaning they're carrying too much cash, or they're not investing their cash, or their cash is just dormant. They have too much cash dormant. So the practice checking is holding on to too much cash, or their personal checking or savings are holding on to too much cash. Either pay down debt or invest the money. Got to be decisive with this, and we got to carry only three months worth of personal living expenses in money market. And I don't want more than one. I don't want more than 1 to 1.5 times overhead in the practice tops. I mean, that's what that's all we want. From there, we've got to make a decision, be decisive. And anytime there's money above that, we got to sweep it out. We've got to keep it productively moving.
Good advice. Good advice.
Second would be retirement plan. People are not putting the right retirement plan in place. They're either deducting too little. They've got a basic 401k, but they're not doing defined benefit plan. They're not doing cash balance pension. They're not. You could put away $200,000 a year tax deductible, and most people are doing 16 to 18,000. So once your cash flow improves and the practice is healthy, you've got to shift from a traditional 401k plan to a profit sharing plan, and then to a cash balance pension.
Okay, hang on. This is good, man.
Yeah.
We're gonna break our 3-minute rule here, but that's okay.
I was just 45 seconds.
Okay. Hey, so hang on, because there are a lot of people who have no earthly idea what you're talking about. And if I'm listening to this, I'm going, wait a minute, is a 401k, is that like a SEP? Is that like right? So what is the difference? Find the difference between a profit sharing versus a 401k versus a what's the standby, the garden plan or whatever.
IRA, right? So here's the thing, just say it starts with being able to put away $5,000 a year, and it goes up to be able to put away $200,000 a year. Think of it, it's all just the same thing. It's just a big old IRA. It's got
different rules.
It's got different rules, and your financial advisor should be pushing you to where you can put more into it every year. And if he's not testing your staff census, and if he's not bringing you that, or at least at the end of every year, he's got to be going, we can't do anything different this year. We got to stick with the same plan we've got, or we need to adjust to this one. Like every year, you should be doing that. So for us, every year in June, we take the staff census, we look at all the numbers, we say we either stick with the plan we've got, or we've got to increase the plan we've got. And so that's a real critical step. All right. Do you want me to go to the next one?
So, but from a profit sharing plan, okay. So if I have I think a lot of people are wondering what is the difference in the rules between, and you explain that well. I mean, it's really what you can put in, but there's a difference between a SEP and a business versus a 401k that a business has versus a package that maybe has a match. And well, some 401ks have a match as well, right?
Yeah.
So
let's do it this way. Every plan that I'm talking about has an amount that you get yourself versus an amount that your team gets.
Gotcha.
All right. And so every one of these plans has some kind of a thing like that, except for an IRA. Like the $5,000 a year one is an individual account just for you. And you can only do one or two types of plans combined. You can't do all of them. Okay. So there's
you personally versus what you're doing as the administrator in your business.
Yeah. So what you want to look at is say, of the money I'm putting into this thing, how much of it am I keeping, right? How much is going to me? Because a lot of people do a 401k plan and they're only keeping 60% of the money they're putting in. Well, that wastes the entire tax benefit of the plan. We say that no matter which plan you're picking, as you get older, you'll be able to upgrade from a 401k plan. You can put in 18 grand a year, right? A SEP IRA, like you mentioned, you can't really do that one once you have employees without having to give them a lot. A SEP IRA, I've got to give people the same percentage into their plan that I put into mine of my salary. And so a SEP works great if you're like an associate independent contractor, but once you get people working for you, that one's not as viable anymore. But the 401k, it's a plan where you don't have to give a lot away. You can give like very little away, hardly at all, but you're only going to be able to get 18 grand away. Then you do a profit sharing plan, you can get 53,000 a year away. In a profit sharing scenario, you want to make sure you're keeping at least 85% of the total amount of money is going to you. So if you're putting 53 grand away, you don't want to be putting more than 10,000 away to employees would be too much.
Awesome.
You know,
Awesome.
you'd only want to be giving them 7,000 or 8,000 in order for you to get 53. And then above that, there's what's called a pension plan. And a pension plan comes in a lot of formats. But it's a different thing than a 401k or a profit sharing plan. It actually, you can have both a profit sharing plan and you can have a pension plan. And a pension plan is kind of like the old car companies like GE and Ford. If you go to work for a company, they pay a pension one day. These types of plans, you can put hundreds of thousands of dollars away into them for yourself, but you have to have some ratios of matching for staff. So you might give away 3 grand per staff person to get 200,000 away for yourself.
Right. And most of the time that's based on a percentage, right? I mean, most of the time those things are based on a percent that they're making.
In the pension world, it's age and compensation. So if you're 53, you get a certain amount. If you're 41, you get a certain amount. If you're making 80 grand, you get more than if you're making 30 grand. So it's a whole more complex formula. But we have probably 15 to 20% of our clients are in the pension plan world, and they're putting away high 6-figure amounts of money, and they get a deduction from that. That saves them 50,000 plus a year in taxes. And so,
Reese, you are the man, dude. Dude, you are the man, and I know I got you all into that. But I appreciate the explanation. And so, you know, you were going to give us 3 things. One, you're saying the number one thing you run into is people have too much cash. Number 2,
these aren't too little in their importance or of order of importance. These are I can't rank these in order of importance. But liquidity, the retirement plan structure, I would say they obsess over real estate too much. They have too much real estate obsession, meaning they're tying a lot of money up into real estate equity when they don't need to. You can buy the real estate and finance it, and then use your cash for growing the practice and growing your other assets, growing other investments. I don't like people paying off real estate so fast early in their career because it's the last thing you should pay off. Like Let the financing do its job. Like, you're paying it off slowly, and you're letting the bank hold the money. They're keeping the debt on their balance sheet. You don't want to tie your money up in the property, because if you put $1 million in the paid off real estate, it's not like it's growing anymore than if you put 20% into it. You put 20% into it, it's going to grow just the same.
Dude, that makes total sense, and I never thought about it like that. Listen, can you spend another second with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time talking to, and we have, our listeners and our viewers are they're all over the board, right? I mean, some of them are approaching that typical, 50-year age and so forth, and some of them are in their 40s, and we got a lot of, we have some new guys. So if they're, if I'm a young associate, and let's say I don't have my own practice yet, and that's where I want to go here in the next 12 months, or perhaps I'm just out of school and I'm just associating or whatever. What's the number one thing that you'd say I need to do?
You gotta learn the truth about money. I would say continuing education is very important. For me, I would spend my time on, like, I release a lot of online CE. My podcast every week, the Dentist Money Show, is like a really heavy CE thing. You've got your show. These content is where you got to go learn and learn and learn.
And it's out there. I mean, it's free.
Yeah. I would say spend that phase of your life should be all about accumulating the truth about money, like learning the truth about practice profitability, marketing, growth, learning about what a DSO is, where's the industry going, learn about investing, learn about spending and insurance policies and taxes and debt and savings. You can consult with people. Like, my firm has an associate's package. We've got an employee package. We've got a student's package. You can get basic advice and consulting. You just got to reach out and get it. That's what I would be focused on as a young associate. And I wouldn't give anyone my money. I would not pay off my student loans. I would just, I think
that's one of the biggest things that I see. That is one of the biggest things that I see. That's one of the biggest things I see. These guys put so much focus on paying down that student loan, and then they get in a situation where they're ready to go make a move, and they don't have what they need from a capital standpoint.
If you don't have $50,000 liquid, you don't pay down a dime of debt. I mean, but if you have 100,000, I could say 100,000 is probably not even negligent. Like, I would rather see you be paying 7% interest on a student loan if you have anything less than $100,000.
And I think that, and there are lots of people who are listening to this going, "Oh my gosh, but you don't understand, Reese. This loan is hanging over my head like a ball and chain, dude."
I feel your pain. But my truth is, you're never going to pay off all your debt for like 20 years anyway. So just get used to it, people. Here's the truth. Like, you came into a career where you're going to have a lot of debt. You're going to go from cone beam to new TIs to ground up construction to buying out a second practice. And eventually, in 5 or 6 years, you're going to realize that you're obsessing over something that you didn't need to. But you'll be able to pay off all your debt just fine. By the time you're 50 years old, you can be completely debt-free and be financially independent if you do the things in the right order. But if you give up your firepower, if you give up that dry powder, which is that liquidity, and don't go buy a big house, rent for a long time, and then you're going to be fine. Now, Sean's going to put a caption to be like, "Great host, but the guest was out of control."
No. We're going to title this. Listen, we're going to title this Reese Harper, pastor of the Church of the Cold Hard Truth. That's what we're going.
Anyway.
No, seriously, I agree with everything you're saying, man. And I think if I'm a young guy, I got to hear what you're saying. I understand that thing is hanging over your neck, but you know what? All you're going to do is pay it off and then go into debt. Listen, get yourself in a liquid position because you're not going to pay it off anyway for the next 20 years. Very valuable advice. And that's one of the biggest things that we see. Reese, listen, I appreciate you staying with us. We got to do this again. We're a little bit over time, and I appreciate you making the time for us. This show is all about having happier clients, better results, making more money, but it's also about enjoying the ride along the way. And that's why it's so important to have you telling us about these things and all this great information. I really enjoyed it, Reese. Thank you so much. You can find Reese, by the way, at dentistadvisors.com, and go ahead and go dentistadvisors.com/group and jump into his group, and you can have Reese on a regular basis. Reese,
Yeah, post a question.
thank you so much, my friend.
Thanks a lot, Sean. It's been a pleasure, man.
It really has. We'll do it again. We'll do it again.
See you soon, man.
Take care.